My name is Harold. I'm 81 years old. A few months ago, my heart stopped beating in my own living room. The paramedics later told my wife I was gone for 14 minutes, completely dead. But they were wrong. I wasn't gone. I was with Jesus. And he told me that everything we fear when we watch the news is a lie. He showed me that the terrifying rise of Islamic extremism isn't a sign of its growing strength. It's the sound of its chains breaking before the king. And he showed me the exact year it will all reach a tipping point, 2026. But for you to understand the true weight of what he showed me, you need to know who I was. I wasn't a pastor or a man of deep theological study. For most of my life, I saw the world through the scope of a rifle. I'm a U.S. Army veteran who served in the Gulf War. I saw the Middle East as a place of conflict. My prayers for the people there were a duty, not born from love. I saw Islam as a fortress of opposition. I had no idea that God was about to use my own death to shatter that worldview. I'm going to tell you everything he revealed. The visions of young people dreaming of him, the secret map of his church he unrolled before my eyes, and exactly what the spiritual earthquake of 2026 looks like. If this message is already speaking to your spirit, please subscribe now and click the bell so you hear the rest of this testimony. But first, I want to ask you something. What is your very first feeling when you hear about extremism in the news? Be honest in the comments. Because I promise you, what Jesus is about to show you will change that forever. To understand why Jesus showed me, of all people, this incredible truth about 2026, you have to understand the man I used to be. For most of my life, I saw the world through the scope of a rifle. As a veteran of the Gulf War, I viewed the Middle East as a place defined only by sand, oil, and conflict. My prayers for the people there, if I'm being completely honest with you, were born more from a sense of Christian duty than any real love. I saw Islam as a monolith, a giant fortress of opposition. I believed its people were my enemies. That single belief shaped 40 years of my life and made me blind. A typical morning for me was simple. Coffee in one hand, the newspaper in the other, and the TV news murmuring in the background. I'd scan the headlines from that part of the world, and my jaw would tighten. I'd see reports of violence and anger, and I'd nod, confirming what I already thought I knew. I couldn't see the individuals behind the headlines, the mothers, the sons, the daughters. I only saw a single, faceless threat, and it hardened my heart without me even realizing it. I had no idea God was about to use my own death to shatter that worldview. The day it happened began like any other Tuesday. I was 81, feeling every one of those years in my joints. After lunch, I settled into my worn-out armchair in the living room, the one with the permanent indent from where I always sit. I picked up the local paper, intending to read the sports section while my wife Martha was humming in the kitchen. I felt content, maybe a little tired. There was no warning. I was just an old soldier, about to find out my war was far from over. The first thing I felt was not pain, but an immense, crushing weight. It felt like the ceiling had collapsed right on top of me, right onto my chest. I tried to gasp for air, to call out for Martha, but my lungs wouldn't work. The words on the newspaper in my lap dissolved into a meaningless gray blur. My arms felt like they were made of lead. The last thing my ears registered from this world was the sound of my wife's voice, a terrified shriek on the phone with 911, screaming, "My husband, he's not breathing!" And then, absolute silence. The world just stopped. There was no fade to black, no final thought. 1 second I was in my body, the next I wasn't. It was like being pulled out of heavy, wet clothes. I felt a gentle tug, and suddenly I was floating, weightless, near the ceiling of my own living room. I looked down, and the sight was impossible. There I was, slumped in my armchair. My eyes were open but vacant. My skin already had a pale, waxy look to it. There was no pain, no fear anymore. Just a strange, profound sense of detachment from the chaos unfolding below me. I watched as 2 paramedics in dark blue uniforms burst through the door, their faces grim and focused. They pulled my body onto the floor and started working on me. I saw Martha in the corner, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I wanted to go to her, to tell her it was all right, that I was right here. I tried to speak, to shout her name, but no sound came out. I was just a silent observer, watching a stranger try to save the empty shell that had been my home for 81 years. One of the paramedics yelled, "Still no pulse, starting compressions again." They were fighting so hard for a life that was no longer there. The doctors told Martha later that my heart didn't beat on its own for a full 14 minutes. 14 minutes where, by every medical definition, I was completely dead. As I watched them work, the scene below began to feel distant, like I was watching it on an old television. Then I felt it again, that gentle tug, only this time it was stronger, an undeniable pull drawing me away from my home, away from my body, and into whatever came next. The scene in my living room dissolved, and I wasn't just pulled. I was welcomed into a tunnel. It wasn't made of rock or dirt, it was made of light. A light that was alive, warm like the first sun of spring on your face, and it hummed with a music that vibrated right through my soul. Every ache, every pain from my 81 years just evaporated. I was whole. For a moment I saw my mother and father, not as I last remembered them, but young and radiant. They didn't speak, just smiled. I felt a peace that I can't explain. The tunnel opened up, and I was standing somewhere else. It wasn't a garden or a city of gold. It was more like standing on the shore of an ocean made of pure color, with gentle waves of soft blues and golds washing over my feet. The sky above wasn't a sky. It was the source of all the light, radiating a love so thick you could feel it on your skin. There was no wind, but everything felt like it was breathing. I knew with absolute certainty that I was no longer near Earth. I was home. And then I saw him. Standing by the shore of colors was a man. He wasn't the pale, blonde-haired Jesus from the paintings. His skin was the color of olive wood, bronzed by a desert sun. His eyes were dark, like rich soil, and they held everything, all the history of the world and all the love in the universe. He smiled, and I knew his name without anyone telling me. Yeshua. My legs just gave out from under me. I fell to my knees, weeping, not from sadness, but because my soldier's heart finally broke open. He walked toward me, and the light around him didn't get brighter. It just got more real. He put a hand on my shoulder, and the feeling was one of complete belonging. His voice wasn't a boom of thunder. It was quiet, personal, and it sounded like truth itself. He said my name, Harold. The way he said it, I felt like I was hearing it for the very first time. Then he looked right into me and said, "I have something to show you. It's about the people you were taught to hate, and then you will go back." He didn't just speak to me in words or parables. The air around us seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from a road, and suddenly I was seeing through his eyes. The first thing he showed me were the exact images that used to tighten my jaw when I watched the news. Angry men, black flags, weapons raised in the air, but Jesus let me feel the spirit behind their rage. It wasn't strength, it was a shrieking, desperate terror. "This is the last violent convulsion of a spirit that knows its time is short," he told me. "It is thrashing because it is losing its grip on millions." The scene shifted instantly. I was no longer seeing angry men. I was inside a small, simple bedroom in Tehran, Iran. A young woman, maybe 20 years old, was asleep. I watched as a figure made of pure light entered her room and stood by her bed. It was Jesus. He didn't preach a sermon. He simply offered her a drink of living water in the dream. I watched as she woke up, tears streaming down her face, whispering his name. Then he showed me thousands of similar scenes, happening every single night, all across the lands I once considered my enemy. "I am invading their dreams," he said. Pause for a second and think about that. Has God ever spoken to you in a dream? Something so real and so vivid that you woke up and knew it wasn't just your own mind? If this message is touching a place in your heart that you can't explain, please take a moment to like this video so more people can find it. And let me know in the comments if you believe God still speaks to us this way, because what he showed me proves that he is speaking to an entire generation, and the world has no idea it's even happening. He brought me back to the first vision of the angry men, and now I understood. He showed me that for every one man who picks up a weapon in the name of that false spirit, 1,000 more are secretly on their knees in the quiet of their rooms asking, "There must be more to life than this." That anger we see on TV isn't a sign of their strength. It's the sound of their prison walls cracking. It's the desperate noise a defeated enemy makes when the true king is taking back his territory, one dream and one soul at a time. I stood there, speechless. Everything I thought I knew, my entire 40-year worldview as a soldier, was completely shattered in a matter of minutes. I had seen them as a monolith of hate, but Jesus showed me a field of hearts crying out for him. I thought I had seen the most incredible thing possible, that I had received the whole message. I was wrong. That was only the beginning. And what Jesus showed me after that was what made me fall to my knees for the second time. It was a secret map, a fire burning underground. He showed me a spiritual map, and from Morocco to Indonesia, tiny points of light began to appear. They were secret churches, a family in a basement in Iraq, students sharing a single downloaded Bible on a phone in Egypt, and then Jesus connected the dots, and the lights formed a vast, brilliant network that pulsed with life. "The gates of hell will not prevail against this," Jesus said. "This is not a human movement, it is my spirit, building my church." I thought this was the final revelation, but then he looked at me and said, "This is only the foundation for what comes next." "The world is preparing for a physical war," Jesus told me, "but the real event is a spiritual earthquake." He then showed me the year 2026. I didn't see a specific headline or a single event, but I felt a tremendous shaking. It was as if the very spiritual ground beneath the Islamic world fractured. I saw a crisis of faith on a scale I couldn't comprehend, as the official narratives and structures they had trusted for centuries crumbled. Millions of people were suddenly left standing in the rubble of their beliefs, looking up and asking, "Who is the real God?" And in that exact moment of questioning, all the seeds he had planted in their dreams for years suddenly burst into life. He showed me the harvest, and it was staggering. It wasn't a trickle, it was a flood. I saw visions of men and women, young and old, turning to him with an unstoppable force. It was like a dam had broken. The secret prayers, the midnight dreams, the quiet whispers, it all came pouring out into the open. I watched as millions found the living water he had offered them when they were all alone in their rooms. The sight was too much for my old soldier's heart. I looked at their faces, the very faces I had been trained to see as the enemy, and I saw them through his eyes. The love he felt for them was a physical force, an ocean of grace that washed over me. I fell to my knees again, right there on that shore of colors, and I just sobbed. I couldn't speak. He put his hand on my head, his voice gentle, and quoted the prophet saying, "Blessed be Egypt my people, Assyria my handiwork, and Israel my inheritance." He let me weep for a moment, and then he lifted my chin so I was looking directly into his eyes. "This is why I brought you here, Harold," he said. "The church in the West sees a threat. They are praying for protection. I want them to pray for the harvest. I want them to see what I see." He showed me that our role isn't to fear or to fight a physical battle, but to prepare our hearts and our resources to welcome the greatest influx of new brothers and sisters the world has ever seen. The visions began to fade, but his presence remained. The final thing he said to me sealed my purpose. "Your time on earth is not yet over. You have one more mission, soldier." He looked at me with an authority that was both absolute and full of love. "Go back. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them to stop looking at the world with fear and to start looking with my eyes. Tell them the greatest revival in history is about to begin in the last place they would ever expect." And then I felt a jolt. Jesus looked at me, the visions fading, but his eyes still holding mine. "Your time is not yet, Harold. You have one more mission. Go back. Tell them what you have seen." A cold dread filled me, a feeling I hadn't known in his presence. "No." The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Please don't make me go back. I'm just an old man. Why me?" I didn't want to leave. Leaving this place, this peace, this feeling of being truly home felt like a punishment worse than death itself. I had finally found everything, and he was asking me to leave it. He didn't get angry. His gaze was full of a deep, knowing love. "Precisely because you are a soldier, Harold," he said, his voice steady and kind. "You spent your life looking at them through the scope of a rifle. You saw a threat. Now you have seen them through my eyes. You have seen a harvest. A pastor's words might be dismissed, but the words of a soldier who has seen both sides of the war, those words will carry the weight of a truly changed heart. They need to hear it from you." His reason was absolute. He had chosen me not despite my past, but because of it. Before I could even nod in acceptance, I felt a jolt, as if I'd been struck by lightning. It wasn't a gentle pullback, it was a violent slam. The peace shattered, replaced by an explosion of searing pain across my chest. The symphony of heaven was gone, replaced by the frantic beeping of machines and muffled shouting. The weight of my own body crashed down on me, every one of my 81 years returning at once. The cold, hard floor was beneath me. I was back. And the transition from that perfect love to this brutal reality was the most painful thing I have ever endured. My eyes fluttered open. The first thing I saw was the fluorescent light of a hospital ceiling, then my wife Martha's face, etched with worry. A doctor was leaning over me, saying something about a miracle. My throat was raw, and it hurt to breathe. I tried to speak, to get the words out before I forgot. "Martha," I rasped. "I saw him. I was with Jesus." She just squeezed my hand, a sad smile on her face. "You're confused, honey. Just rest." That look in her eyes, pity, concern, was the first wall I hit. I had my mission, but I realized right then that delivering it would be my final battle. That look in Martha's eyes was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, I tried to share what I saw. I told my pastor, a good man, but he just smiled kindly and spoke about the brain's beautiful tricks when deprived of oxygen. I tried to tell my son, but he'd pat my arm and say, "Dad, you've been through a lot. Let's focus on your recovery." They wanted to hear about seeing angels or walking through pearly gates. They didn't want to hear about a spiritual revolution in Iran. They wanted a comforting story, but Jesus had given me a battle plan. The human resistance was difficult, but the other kind was worse. It began with nightmares. I'd dream I was back with Jesus, but when I opened my mouth to speak, only dust would come out. Some nights, I'd wake up certain someone was in the room, a heavy, oppressive presence that vanished when I turned on the light. Twice, my nephew tried to record my story on his phone, and both times the recording was mysteriously corrupted, just static. It became clear to me. Something was actively trying to keep me silent, to bury this message under a blanket of fear and doubt. I almost gave in. I thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just a confused old man. I sat in that same armchair where my heart had stopped, feeling the full weight of my age and my weakness. But then I remembered his voice. It wasn't a memory. It felt as real as the chair beneath me. "Precisely because you are a soldier, Harold." He had chosen me not despite my past, but because of it. I had my final marching orders, and a soldier does not disobey a direct command from his king. In that moment, the fear broke. I knew I couldn't die again until my mission was complete. And that is why I am telling you this now, with whatever time I have left. I realize that all that resistance, from the people who loved me, and from the darkness that opposed me, was the ultimate proof of how important this message is. If a simple story from an old man was so threatening that forces both seen and unseen tried this hard to suffocate it, then the truth it holds must be powerful enough to shake the world. It's a truth they don't want you to know. It's a hope they don't want you to feel, but it's the truth I was sent back to deliver. And so I am telling you this now, not as a story to be debated, but as a direct order I was sent back to deliver. Jesus showed me that what we see on the news is a lie. That terrifying roar of extremism is not the sound of a conquering lion. It's the death rattle of a spirit that knows its time is up. He showed me he is invading dreams, building his church in secret basements, and preparing the world for a spiritual earthquake in 2026. He sent me back because he needed a soldier to tell you what's really happening behind the curtain. Maybe you're watching this and your heart is filled with fear. You see the headlines and feel hopeless. You might have a friend or a family member caught in that darkness, and you think they are lost forever. Jesus sent me to speak directly to you. He wants you to know that where you see an impenetrable fortress, he sees a field that is ripe for the harvest. The people you've been taught to fear are the very people he is pursuing with a relentless personal love. What looks like an advancing darkness is just the shadow cast by an approaching unstoppable dawn. So what are our marching orders? He was crystal clear. We are to stop praying prayers of fear, asking God to build walls to protect us. Instead, we are to start praying for the harvest. Pray for the dreamers to understand their visions. Pray for the secret believers to be filled with courage. Prepare your hearts and your churches to welcome a flood of new brothers and sisters from the last place on earth you'd ever expect. Our mission is to see the world not through the lens of the news, but through the eyes of the King who is reclaiming his inheritance. This isn't just my testimony. It's a message from the commander, and it has your name on it. If this truth has stirred something in your spirit, please share this video right now with someone who is living in fear and needs this hope. And subscribe to hear more about the incredible things God is doing. Because the shocking truth I was sent back to reveal isn't about the power of a failing stronghold of hate. It's about the unstoppable, overwhelming harvest of love that is about to sweep the entire globe, starting in the very place it all began.